The smell of burning rubber and high-octane gasoline still lingered in the humid Florida air when NASCAR driver Tommy "Thunder" Jackson, driving the iconic Noi 43 car, vanished without a trace on July 23, 1997, after completing practice rounds at Daytona International Speedway, leaving behind one of the most perplexing mysteries in motorsports history. Tommy, a 28-year-old rising star from Charlotte, North Carolina, had been showing incredible promise in his sophomore season, posting 3 top-5 finishes and establishing himself as a serious contender for Rookie of the Year honors with his aggressive driving style and natural talent behind the wheel. That sweltering afternoon, after a successful practice session where he had clocked the 3rd fastest lap time of 186.3 mph, Tommy was seen by crew members walking toward the parking lot around 6:30 p.m., still wearing his blue and white racing suit, carrying his helmet bag, and appearing to be in good spirits after discussing setup changes with his crew chief. Where are you reading from? Share your city and country in the comments before we continue this story. His wife Sarah, who was 8 months pregnant with their first child, had called him around 6:45 p.m. to confirm their dinner plans. But Tommy never answered his phone, and surveillance cameras showed him reaching his personal vehicle, a red 1995 Ford Mustang, before the footage mysteriously cut out due to a technical malfunction that lasted exactly 7 minutes. When Tommy failed to return home that evening and missed the team's mandatory driver meeting the next morning, Sarah contacted Daytona Beach Police, who initially treated it as a missing person case, but the circumstances surrounding his disappearance would prove far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. The NASCAR community rallied around the search for one of their own, with drivers, crews, and fans organizing volunteer search parties that scoured Central Florida for weeks. But Tommy and his Mustang had seemingly vanished into thin air. 11 years later, a routine traffic stop in a remote area of Georgia would uncover evidence that would finally shed light on what happened to the promising young driver and expose a web of corruption, gambling, and murder that reached into the highest levels of professional racing. The investigation into Tommy Jackson's disappearance revealed a complex web of pressures and conflicts that had been building around the young driver in the months leading up to his vanishing, painting a picture of a man caught between his racing dreams and dangerous external forces. Detective Mike Rodriguez, who specialized in missing persons cases involving public figures, discovered that Tommy had been receiving threatening phone calls and letters in the weeks before his disappearance, messages that warned him to throw races or face serious consequences for himself and his pregnant wife. The investigation revealed that Tommy had been approached by representatives of an illegal gambling syndicate that was fixing NASCAR races by bribing drivers to manipulate race outcomes, a scheme that could generate millions of dollars in profits for those who knew the predetermined results. Tommy's crew chief, veteran mechanic Bill Morrison, testified that the young driver had confided in him about the pressure he was facing, expressing fear for his family's safety while adamantly refusing to compromise his integrity by participating in race-fixing schemes. Financial records showed that Tommy had been offered substantial sums of money to finish in predetermined positions during specific races, offers that he had consistently declined despite his family's modest financial situation and the expensive nature of maintaining a competitive racing operation. The FBI became involved when the investigation revealed the interstate nature of the gambling operation, with agents discovering that several other drivers had received similar threats and that at least 3 had agreed to cooperate with the syndicate to protect their families. Telecommunications analysis revealed that the threatening calls to Tommy had originated from different states, suggesting a sophisticated criminal organization with nationwide reach and the resources to monitor and intimidate multiple NASCAR drivers simultaneously. The investigation also uncovered evidence that certain race officials and NASCAR executives were aware of the gambling syndicate's activities, but had chosen to remain silent to protect the sport's reputation and their own financial interests. Tommy's personal belongings, found in his hauler at Daytona, included a hidden recording device that captured several of the threatening phone calls, providing crucial evidence of the systematic intimidation campaign being waged against him and other drivers. The recordings revealed specific details about the gambling operation, including code names, betting amounts, and the precise manner in which races were being manipulated to ensure predetermined outcomes that benefited the criminal organization. The years following Tommy's disappearance were marked by Sarah's relentless pursuit of answers, while raising their son Michael as a single mother, refusing to accept the official conclusion that her husband had voluntarily abandoned his family and career at the height of his success. Sarah hired private investigators, consulted with psychics, and maintained constant pressure on law enforcement agencies to keep the case active, spending her life savings and taking on multiple jobs to fund the ongoing search for her missing husband. She established the Tommy Jackson Foundation, which provided support for families of missing NASCAR personnel and advocated for improved security measures at racing venues, transforming her personal tragedy into a mission to protect others in the racing community. Michael grew up knowing his father only through photographs, videos, and stories from the racing community, developing an obsession with NASCAR and a burning desire to follow in his father's footsteps, while also seeking answers about what had happened on that July evening in 1997. The NASCAR community never forgot Tommy, with the NAR 43 car being unofficially retired by mutual agreement among team owners, and annual memorial races being held to raise funds for missing persons organizations and support Sarah's ongoing search efforts. Sarah maintained detailed files on every lead, tip, and sighting reported over the years, creating a comprehensive database that she shared with law enforcement and private investigators, demonstrating the systematic approach she had taken to finding her husband. The case attracted national media attention periodically, with true crime television shows, podcasts, and magazine articles keeping Tommy's story in the public consciousness and generating new leads that kept Sarah's hope alive year after year. During this period, several other NASCAR drivers came forward privately to admit they had also been approached by the gambling syndicate, but most were too frightened to speak publicly due to ongoing threats against their families and concerns about potential retaliation. Sarah worked tirelessly to protect these potential witnesses while building a case that could eventually bring the criminals to justice, often serving as an intermediary between frightened drivers and law enforcement agencies. The emotional toll of the prolonged uncertainty was devastating for Sarah, who struggled with depression, anxiety, and the constant stress of not knowing whether her husband was alive or dead, while trying to maintain hope for Michael's sake and her own sanity. On November 15, 2008, exactly 11 years and 3 months after Tommy Jackson's disappearance, a routine traffic stop by Georgia State Trooper Jennifer Walsh on a remote stretch of Highway 441 would finally break open the case and provide the answers that Sarah had been desperately seeking for over a decade. Trooper Walsh had pulled over a speeding vehicle driven by Vincent "Vinny" Castellano, a known associate of organized crime families, when she noticed a red Ford Mustang abandoned in a heavily wooded area approximately 200 yards from the highway, hidden behind thick vegetation that made it invisible from the road. The license plate on the Mustang matched the vehicle that had been reported missing with Tommy Jackson 11 years earlier, and the car's condition suggested it had been deliberately concealed rather than simply abandoned by accident or breakdown. When crime scene investigators processed the vehicle, they discovered Tommy's racing suit in the trunk, along with personal items including his wallet, championship ring, and most significantly, a briefcase containing detailed records of the gambling syndicate's operations and a list of drivers who had been targeted for recruitment or elimination. The briefcase also contained photographs, bank records, and communication logs that revealed the scope of the criminal organization and identified key players in the race-fixing scheme, including several prominent NASCAR officials who had been corrupted by gambling money. DNA evidence found in the car confirmed that Tommy had been in the vehicle when violence occurred, with blood spatter patterns suggesting he had been severely beaten before being removed from the car, though his body was not found in the immediate vicinity. The discovery of the car led to the arrest of Vincent Castellano, whose fingerprints were found throughout the vehicle, and who was charged with kidnapping and murder in connection with Tommy's disappearance, though he initially refused to cooperate with investigators. Crime scene analysis revealed that the car had been intentionally damaged to suggest an accident, with the engine compartment showing signs of sabotage designed to make the vehicle inoperable and strand Tommy in the remote location where he was subsequently abducted by the gambling syndicate. The recovery of the briefcase provided law enforcement with the most comprehensive evidence of race fixing in NASCAR history, exposing a criminal enterprise that had been operating for over a decade and had corrupted multiple levels of the sport's hierarchy. The forensic analysis of evidence recovered from Tommy's abandoned Mustang revealed the systematic nature of his abduction and murder, while also exposing the extensive criminal network that had been manipulating NASCAR races for profit and eliminating drivers who refused to cooperate with their schemes. Dr. Patricia Chen, the forensic pathologist assigned to analyze the physical evidence, determined that the blood patterns and DNA traces in the vehicle indicated Tommy had fought violently for his life before being overpowered by multiple attackers who had ambushed him in the Daytona parking lot. The investigation revealed that Tommy's abduction had been meticulously planned, with surveillance teams tracking his movements for weeks and identifying the optimal location and timing to capture him without witnesses, demonstrating the sophisticated resources available to the criminal organization. Advanced forensic techniques applied to the briefcase contents revealed a treasure trove of evidence that documented years of criminal activity, including detailed records of bribed officials, manipulated race results, and financial transactions totaling over $50 million in illegal gambling profits. The documents showed that Tommy had been targeted for elimination, not just because he refused to cooperate, but because he had been secretly gathering evidence against the syndicate with the intention of exposing their operations to federal authorities and cleaning up the sport he loved. Phone records recovered from the briefcase revealed the identities of high-ranking NASCAR officials who had been receiving regular payments from the gambling syndicate in exchange for inside information about race strategies, driver conditions, and technical specifications that could influence betting outcomes. Under intense interrogation and facing overwhelming evidence, Vincent Castellano eventually confessed to his role in Tommy's murder, revealing that the young driver had been taken to a remote warehouse where he was tortured for information about what evidence he had gathered and who else might be aware of the syndicate's activities. Castellano's confession led investigators to a shallow grave in rural Georgia, where Tommy's remains were finally discovered, bringing closure to Sarah and Michael, while providing the physical evidence needed to pursue murder charges against all members of the criminal conspiracy. The confession also revealed that Tommy's murder had been ordered by crime boss Anthony "Fat Tony" Marconi, who viewed the driver's integrity and investigation as an existential threat to the multi-million-dollar gambling operation that had corrupted professional racing. DNA evidence and ballistics analysis confirmed the details of Castellano's confession, establishing a clear chain of evidence that connected the gambling syndicate to Tommy's murder and provided prosecutors with an airtight case against the criminal organization. The trial of Vincent Castellano, Anthony Marconi, and 12 other members of the gambling syndicate became one of the most sensational criminal cases in sports history, exposing the depth of corruption that had infected NASCAR and shocking fans who had believed in the integrity of their beloved sport. The prosecution, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Diana Morrison, presented overwhelming evidence that included Castellano's detailed confession, forensic evidence from Tommy's car and remains, financial records documenting the gambling operation, and testimony from drivers who had been intimidated by the syndicate. The most dramatic moment of the trial came when Sarah Jackson took the stand to describe 11 years of uncertainty, grief, and determination. Her testimony moving jurors to tears as she described raising Michael alone while never giving up hope that the truth about Tommy's fate would eventually emerge. The defense attempted to argue that Tommy had been involved in the gambling scheme willingly and that his death was the result of a deal gone wrong rather than a planned execution. But this strategy backfired when additional evidence revealed the extent of Tommy's undercover investigation and his cooperation with federal authorities. Testimony from NASCAR officials who had been corrupted by the syndicate revealed the scope of the conspiracy, with races being manipulated through a combination of bribed drivers, sabotaged equipment, and inside information that allowed the criminals to place winning bets with guaranteed outcomes. The trial revealed that the gambling syndicate had been responsible for several other suspicious incidents in NASCAR, including accidents that had been deliberately caused to change race outcomes and the mysterious deaths of 2 other drivers who had threatened to expose the corruption. Expert witnesses testified about the devastating impact of race fixing on the integrity of NASCAR, estimating that millions of fans had been deceived and that legitimate drivers had been robbed of victories and championship opportunities by the criminal manipulation of race results. The prosecution presented evidence that the syndicate had generated over $100 million in illegal profits over a 12-year period, using sophisticated betting strategies based on their ability to predetermine race outcomes through corruption and intimidation. After 3 months of testimony and 2 weeks of deliberation, the jury convicted all defendants on charges including racketeering, murder, conspiracy, and sports bribery, with Castellano and Marconi receiving life sentences without the possibility of parole. The convictions sent shockwaves through the NASCAR community and led to immediate reforms designed to prevent future corruption, including enhanced background checks for officials, improved security measures, and the establishment of an independent integrity unit to monitor the sport. The resolution of Tommy Jackson's case catalyzed unprecedented reforms in NASCAR and professional motorsports worldwide, transforming security protocols, integrity monitoring, and driver protection measures that continue to safeguard the sport today. NASCAR implemented the Tommy Jackson Safety Protocol, requiring comprehensive background checks for all personnel with access to drivers and vehicles, mandatory security escorts for drivers in certain situations, and advanced surveillance systems at all racing venues to prevent future abductions or intimidation. Sarah Jackson channeled her grief and determination into establishing the Racing Integrity Foundation, which monitors gambling activities related to motorsports, provides security training for drivers and their families, and advocates for stronger penalties against those who attempt to corrupt professional racing. The foundation developed educational programs that are now mandatory for all NASCAR drivers, teaching them to recognize and report attempts at race fixing while providing resources to protect themselves and their families from criminal threats. The FBI created a specialized sports integrity unit partially in response to Tommy's case, with agents now regularly monitoring professional racing for signs of gambling corruption and maintaining close relationships with racing organizations to ensure rapid response to potential threats. Michael Jackson, now 23 years old, fulfilled his childhood dream of becoming a NASCAR driver, making his debut in the Cup Series, driving a specially decorated Nascar 43 car that honors his father's memory while competing under enhanced security protocols that his father's death helped establish. The car manufacturer Ford Motor Company established the Tommy Jackson Memorial Scholarship, providing financial support to young drivers from modest backgrounds who demonstrate both racing talent and personal integrity, ensuring that financial pressures don't force future drivers into compromising situations. NASCAR officials who were implicated in the corruption scandal faced criminal charges and lifetime bans from the sport, while new governance structures were implemented to ensure transparency and accountability in all racing operations and decision-making processes. The case inspired similar integrity initiatives in other professional sports, with racing serving as a model for how sports organizations can proactively combat gambling corruption and protect the safety of their athletes and the integrity of competition. Annual memorial races held in Tommy's honor raise funds for missing persons organizations and continue to remind the racing community of the importance of maintaining the sport's integrity against criminal influences. The impact of Tommy's story extends beyond NASCAR, influencing federal legislation that strengthened penalties for sports corruption and provided enhanced protection for athletes who report attempts at game fixing or other criminal activities in professional sports. 10 years after the conviction of Tommy's killers, his legacy continues to protect drivers and preserve the integrity of NASCAR through ongoing reforms and vigilance measures that have fundamentally transformed professional motorsports safety and security. The Racing Integrity Foundation has expanded internationally, working with motorsports organizations on 6 continents to develop anti-corruption protocols and provide security training that has prevented numerous attempted infiltrations by criminal gambling syndicates. Sarah Jackson has become one of the most respected voices in sports integrity, serving on advisory boards for multiple racing organizations and consulting with law enforcement agencies worldwide on combating sports-related corruption and protecting athletes from criminal threats. Michael Jackson's successful NASCAR career serves as a living tribute to his father's memory, with his victories and championship contention demonstrating that the Jackson family's commitment to racing integrity continues through the next generation. The advanced surveillance and security systems implemented in response to Tommy's case have been adopted by racing venues worldwide, creating a global network of protection that makes it virtually impossible for criminal organizations to operate undetected within professional motorsports. Research funded by the Tommy Jackson Foundation has led to breakthrough developments in driver tracking technology, real-time threat assessment systems, and communication protocols that allow for immediate response to potential security threats during racing events. The FBI's Sports Integrity Unit has successfully prevented 17 major corruption attempts in various sports since its establishment, with many of these investigations beginning with intelligence gathered through the NASCAR monitoring systems created in Tommy's memory. Educational programs developed in response to his case have reached thousands of young drivers, mechanics, and racing officials, creating a generation of motorsports professionals who are trained to recognize and resist corruption while prioritizing the safety and integrity of their sport. The Tommy Jackson Safety Protocol has been adopted by racing organizations in over 30 countries, establishing international standards for driver protection that have prevented numerous potential abductions and intimidation campaigns by criminal organizations. NASCAR's integrity monitoring systems, enhanced with artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities, now analyze thousands of data points from each race to detect any signs of manipulation or corruption, ensuring that the sport remains clean and competitive. The case continues to be studied in law enforcement academies and sports management programs as a prime example of how criminal infiltration of professional sports can be detected, prosecuted, and prevented through proper vigilance and international cooperation. 15 years after the discovery of Tommy's abandoned car in the Georgia woods, his story continues to influence sports integrity worldwide and serves as a powerful reminder of the courage required to stand against corruption, even in the face of deadly threats. The Racing Integrity Foundation has evolved into a global organization that monitors not only NASCAR, but all forms of professional motorsports, having identified and prevented corruption attempts that could have compromised the integrity of racing championships on every continent. Sarah Jackson has authored 2 books about her experience, including a best-selling memoir that details her 11-year search for truth and a guidebook for families dealing with missing loved ones, both of which have provided comfort and practical advice to thousands of people facing similar tragedies. Michael Jackson's championship victory in 2019, driving the number 43 car that his father had made famous, represented a symbolic triumph of integrity over corruption and demonstrated that the values Tommy died defending continue to thrive in NASCAR. The technologies and protocols developed in response to Tommy's case have been adapted for use in other high-profile sports where gambling corruption poses a threat, including soccer, basketball, and tennis, creating a comprehensive framework for protecting athletic competition worldwide. Universities now offer degree programs in sports integrity that use Tommy's case as a foundational example, training the next generation of professionals who will safeguard athletic competition against criminal infiltration and corruption. The annual Tommy Jackson Memorial Race has become one of NASCAR's most prestigious events, with drivers competing not only for victory, but for the honor of carrying forward the legacy of a man who died defending the sport's integrity. International law enforcement cooperation in sports corruption cases has been revolutionized by the protocols developed during the investigation of Tommy's murder, enabling rapid information sharing and coordinated responses to transnational criminal organizations that target professional sports. The gambling syndicate responsible for Tommy's death was eventually linked to corruption attempts in multiple sports across several countries, validating the international scope of the threat and the importance of the security measures implemented in his memory. Research institutions studying sports corruption cite Tommy's case as the turning point that awakened the athletic world to the sophisticated nature of modern gambling syndicates and the need for equally sophisticated countermeasures to protect competitive integrity. The Tommy Jackson Center for Sports Integrity, established at the University of North Carolina, serves as a research hub and training facility where athletes, officials, and law enforcement personnel learn to combat corruption while honoring the memory of a driver who sacrificed everything to protect the sport he loved. Today, more than 2 decades after Tommy "Thunder" Jackson disappeared from the Daytona International Speedway parking lot, his legacy lives on through every safety protocol that protects drivers, every corruption investigation that preserves sporting integrity, and every young racer who chooses courage over compromise in the face of criminal pressure. The number 43 car continues to race in NASCAR, now driven by Michael Jackson, whose success on the track serves as a living monument to his father's memory and proof that integrity and talent can triumph over corruption and intimidation. Sarah Jackson, now recognized as one of the world's leading experts on sports integrity and athlete protection, continues to travel internationally, speaking to sports organizations, law enforcement agencies, and government officials about the ongoing threats posed by criminal gambling syndicates and the measures necessary to combat them. The Racing Integrity Foundation operates in 47 countries, having directly prevented over 300 corruption attempts in various motorsports, and providing security training to more than 10,000 drivers, mechanics, and racing officials, who now serve as the sport's first line of defense against criminal infiltration. Tommy's abandoned Mustang, carefully preserved and displayed at the NASCAR Hall of Fame, serves as a powerful reminder of the price that can be paid for sporting integrity and the importance of never compromising with criminal forces that seek to corrupt athletic competition. The advanced security and monitoring systems developed in response to his case have been credited with saving the lives of at least 12 athletes in various sports who faced similar threats from gambling syndicates, proving that Tommy's sacrifice continues to protect others decades after his death. The FBI's Sports Integrity Unit has grown into an international coalition of law enforcement agencies that share intelligence and coordinate operations against criminal organizations that target professional sports, with Tommy's case serving as the foundational example of how such investigations should be conducted. Educational programs based on his story reach millions of young athletes annually, teaching them to recognize and resist corruption, while emphasizing that true victory comes from competing with integrity rather than accepting criminal shortcuts or succumbing to intimidation. The annual pilgrimage of NASCAR drivers and fans to Tommy's gravesite has become a tradition that reinforces the sport's commitment to the values he died defending, with each new generation of racers learning about the man who chose death over dishonor and whose courage helped preserve the integrity of their sport. Michael Jackson's children, Tommy's grandchildren, are growing up in a NASCAR community that is safer and more secure because of their grandfather's sacrifice, representing the continuing legacy of a man whose commitment to integrity transcended his own life and continues to protect future generations of racers. The story of Tommy Jackson proves that even in the darkest circumstances, when faced with overwhelming criminal pressure and threats to family safety, individual courage and moral conviction can create lasting change that protects countless others and preserves the fundamental values that make athletic competition meaningful and inspiring for millions of fans worldwide.